Well,
Mike.
howdy do, buckaroos. This is Joe Leydon from Cowboys and Indians magazine, and it is my great pleasure and privilege today to be talking to Don McLean, who is in his celebratory year for the 50th anniversary of his classic hit, American Pie. So, good afternoon, Don, and you look like you've cowboyed up a little bit for the occasion.
I'm always cowboyed up. You should see my room here. I've got Hopalong Cassidy returns and some custom made boots over there and all kinds of stuff. Gene Autry, Roy, the Duke.
Well, no, you mentioned Hopalong Cassidy. For a while, and maybe now it's been remastered. Your American Pie album. Didn't you have a poem
Yes, it's on
for
there
William
now.
Boyd?
Yeah, on the video. It's actually it's on the re-release of the vinyl, and it's also in the insert of the a re-release of the album on the DVD or the CD rather. Um, that is a poem that I wrote free verse back in 1969, and we made a poster of it, and then we put it on the record. And because of the black and white days, American Pie was like a dividing line between the black and white days, which was the 50s and before, and now this sort of bedlam that was going on in America. And so I put William Boyd as me in this poem as the dividing line. And we had to talk to him and get his permission. He died shortly afterwards.
Hmm.
But it's in a plaque on the wall in the hospital where he passed away.
Oh,
So that's I've been connected to William Boyd all my life and to Hopalong Cassidy. In fact, one of the reasons I moved to Palm Desert is because his house is about a mile away from here.
well, what do you think is about the man and his legend uh, that so
Well,
appealed to you?
William Boyd, you want me to talk about this for a moment?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, William Boyd was the best actor of all the B actors, Gene and Roy, and the old guys, Buck Jones and Tom Mix and Hoot Gibson and Ken Maynard were 101 Wild West um, refugees into the into the film business. Buck Jones is the most famous with movie collectors, and I am the owner of Buck Jones's steerhead belt buckle.
Oh, wow. Oh,
So if
wow.
you ever see a Buck Jones movie, he always wears that buckle. I own that buckle,
Hmm.
and it's filigreed and handmade by Edward Boland in the 1920s when he came to Hollywood. There were a number of other, of course, guys that made fancy things for not only cowboys but also ranchers, who would get together and have a posse, and march in the Rose Bowl parade or in the New Year's Day parade or whatever on Palominos, and they were so Boland made hundreds and hundreds of these saddles for them. But then the Lone Ranger started using the Boland gear, and Hoppy used the Boland saddle, and so on. So he was the best actor because he was a genius actor because he was a great silent screen star in the Valentino mold. You see, he'd been a friend of Rudolph Valentino's and he starred in Cecil B. DeMille epics. So he was one of these Gloria Swanson type silent screen stars that fell into the character of Cassidy in 1965, in 1935, because he had a regular career. He was making movies with all sorts of big stars, but they weren't really taking off. Once, and then he was an alcoholic also, and he had a problem because another guy named Bill Boyd got busted for some bad things that he was doing, and they put my William Boyd's picture in the newspaper, and it killed his deal with the movie people. So he was laying on the beach, and the daughter of his third or fourth wife, he had five wives, came out to wake him up and said that, you know, Pop Sherman was on the phone and wanted to talk to him about this Cassidy movie. So he took the call and said, yeah, I'd like to play the part, but I got to do it the way I want to do it. And here's a guy who's down on his ass, and he's still not saying, oh, thank you so much for the work. So he was that way. He had a certain incredible dignity, and the character was supposed to be the way the character is in the books, the Clarence Mulford books. Clarence Mulford lived in Brooklyn and in Maine and wrote these books, and he was really a Gabby Hayes type character. That was the Hopalong Cassidy that was in the Mulford books. But William Boyd said, no, I want a white horse, and I'm going to wear black. And if you look at the first movie, you'll see that he cobbled together the outfit. He had all the pieces, and especially including the steer slide on the neckerchief, and that slide is actually a cow's vertebrae. Isn't it funny that a cow's vertebrae looks exactly like a cow head with steer heads with their horns? Isn't that funny? So we got that, see? And as he went along, he refined the outfit, but from the very beginning, he was a remarkable sound actor because sound just came in. And I guess he'd had a lot of practice because he'd made quite a few sound movies with important people. So he was accustomed to not rolling his eyes, and doing silent screen takes, you know what I mean? And so he's very relaxed, and he's got this great voice. So an unlikely person to be a Western star, but he embraced the character, and as the others did also, and they did it, interestingly enough, because they wanted to give American youth a wholesome image to live up to. Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, all those people. They had their code of conduct, almost like the Boy Scout code, and they were doing that for the youth of America. They felt it was a patriotic thing that they were doing by, certainly Clayton Moore did when he portrayed the Lone Ranger. So it's a beautiful time, and they made beautiful movies. And the William Boyd pictures, especially the first 30 or so, he made 66 features. And then the first 30 are absolute masterpieces. They really are. They've got the greatest directors, and Leslie Sealander, and then, he was hopelessly typecast in 1948, and he was going broke because no one would hire him after being that famous for all those years. And, he would do the rest, I guess the department store opening or something like that, But he took a print of one of his movies to the local NBC affiliate. And he said, would you be interested in running, a movie like this? Well, they were desperate for programming, and they did it. And see, by that time, he had spent all the money he had to buy the rights to those movies. So he had something that he owned, and boy, that went through the roof. And I remember that as like it was yesterday, seeing those movies every day at like 4 p.m. And then a couple of years later, after that had petered out, he started doing his own little series. But that was really with Edgar Buchanan. But that was more for kiddies, it was for little kids.
Yeah, people tend to forget that, William Boyd was really an early TV pioneer in this regard.
And a merchandising pioneer.
Yes.
He had a guy named Toby Anguish. Toby Anguish was this guy who came up with this merchandising master plan.
Hmm.
And he ended up with nearly, I think, 2,000 different items that you go on eBay and look up Hopalong Cassidy, and there's still a lot of them around. Just so many, they have just so many things they did. And nobody, when I was a little boy, everybody in my family knew they could make me very happy at Christmas by giving me anything that had his name on it or his picture on it. And I'm still the same way,
There you go. There you go. Well, talking about your youth, uh, you were in your early teens when Buddy Holly died in a plane crash, February 3rd, 1959. And of course, Buddy Holly is the person we associate very closely with your great song, American Pie. Do you remember your first impression as a teenager when you heard about Buddy Holly's death?
Well, I was the paper boy that cut open the papers in the song. The song is biographical, so I can't remember if I cried the day the music died or the papers. I cut those papers open and there it was, and I was shocked because I was really in love with Buddy Holly's music. When I was a tender age, 13 or whatever I was, and I was discovering all these people. I mean, the Everly Brothers and Bo Diddley and Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Buddy Holly, and it's just a one great thing after another. The real deal too, and it came from the grassroots of America. Where these people come from and how they do this. Brilliant, amazing, and so we were all just floored, and we all had lots of these records. So I was shocked to death, when this happened, and carried it with me for many years. I had a parallel odyssey, really, of attempting to learn and grow as an artist and a singer and an instrumentalist and find my way into show business at the same time staying in the New Rochelle mold of going to college and finishing high school and getting a degree and all that. So I was going in a parallel, and then when I got the degree after my father died, I really got it in part because he always wanted me to go to college, and I didn't want to go. I just wanted to go out and sing. But I got the degree, and I looked up and I said, "Well, Dad, I did it for you." So, and then from that point on, I started going. I went up the Hudson River and started singing with Pete Seeger in an environmental project that he had started, and that became a very exciting time in my life because I learned a lot, and yet I'm still bringing with me my rock and roll and my pop music and all these other things that I love, but I couldn't really talk about it too much because the folk people were so limited in their ability and still are to really understand music. And yet the best ones that I knew, Seeger being among them, did understand that, of course, because parents were classical musicians.
Mm-hmm.
But the most of them were very limited. They play three chords and they can sing, Lolly Tudum or something, and they think they're Mozart, and that annoyed me. So I pulled away from that after a while because I wanted to do things on my first record. I had strings, I had a rock and roll band, I had just me solo with guitar. So I did all kinds of stuff right from the beginning. The footprint of what I wanted to do was with the Tapestry album, the diversity of music and all that. And that wasn't, what was expected,
Mm-hmm.
from somebody who was in the folk realm.
Well, when you did write the song, American Pie, I'm sure you've only been asked this question 1,000 times this
Easy.
week.
This week, right?
But what inspired you to actually put these feelings into a song? I mean, when were you ready
Well,
to write American Pie, and what
uh,
told you were ready?
first of all, I didn't drop out when I was 15 years old and become a musician
Mhm.
in order to have people tell me what to do. I dropped out because I never wanted to work for anybody, and I realized that after I had been a paper boy. And after I saw the treatment my father and my mother got from the company my father worked for, I never wanted to work for anybody. And so I realized one, you got to save your money, so you always have a fund. I'll say this, you can edit it, but Humphrey Bogart called it a fuck you fund. You always have to have that. So I've always had one of those. And so I was going to do only the things that I wanted to do on these records and make them exactly the way I wanted them made with the help of the producer and other musicians, which were selected by me for certain purposes. So American Pie was part of a concept record. And what I wanted was a long song about America, which was a rock and roll song where all the other songs would make sense once you heard this at the end of the record.
Mhm.
But it was turned out so well that they had to put it at the beginning. So it changed my plan for that's the one change I did make. I allowed that to be made because I realized it was a sensible thing to do. But that's how I work, and so
Mhm.
I do what I'm ready to do because I know when I'm ready to do it, and I know when I've got something that, and also the audience was super receptive in those days to what I and people like me were doing. That audience was out there. A lot of those people, there were hundreds of singer-songwriter, folky, rocky type people out there, that faded away you never heard of, that had record deals and stuff. So I've survived 50 years. I've had many comebacks where suddenly in the 80s I'm number one with Crying. Where'd that come from? Yeah, I'd like to see some, folk singer sing that song sometime, or Since I Don't Have You, because I knew I had to do other things with my voice and with my talent other than sing Barbara Allen,
Mhm.
and I like the protest aspect of the folk period, and that was new. That was something that was relatively new, and so you could put an edge into this music. So I wrote songs like Orphans of Wealth and The Grave, which George Michael did to protest the invasion of Iraq. And so you could put material on these records that meant more than just entertainment.
Well, now people may forget now what a radical thing it was to record a song as long as American Pie and then get it on the radio, get it on the charts.
Yeah.
And up until very recently, it was the longest single ever to hit number one. And I understand when you were finally, uh, you know, replaced, if you will, by Taylor Swift with All Too Well, she wrote you a very lovely note, did she not?
Yes, she's quite a lovely lady, and we should be very happy to have her in the music business because she seems to have high aspirations for her music and her personal life. And we have a lot of men and women in the music business who are always looking for the lowest possible common denominator and getting ever lower every time. Um, so she stands in stark contrast to that. So I was very happy that this happened right at this 50th anniversary thing. It landed in our laps. It wouldn't have happened like that if it had been 47 years or something. But we're doing this 50th anniversary. Boom, this happens. So yeah, and recently I saw she was in a bit of a dust up with some guy who said that because occasionally she would have a co-writer or somebody who would do a part of the song with her, or fix up something she wrote or something, that meant that she didn't write her own songs. And obviously this guy did not know anything about the music business, because Pete Seeger had his name on "We Shall Overcome" for changing one word from we will overcome to "we shall overcome."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that he heard that song sung both ways, and he took credit for that, which he was kind of ashamed of doing later on. So, there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
funniness in the alchemy of songwriting, but I wrote her a little note. I said, well, I guess this guy never heard of Lennon and McCartney.
Mm-hmm. Touche, touche.
you know.
Well, now, a few years back, I was interviewing the great director. He's no longer with us, Arthur Penn. And I believe it was the 40th anniversary of Bonnie and Clyde. And we got to the point in the conversation where I had to ask, well, do you ever, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but do you ever get tired of talking about Bonnie and Clyde? He said, well, it's not so much that, Joe, but I have directed other movies. I mean, I have done other things. And I think of, songs you've recorded, and, sometimes you've written them, sometimes, you've covered other people's songs. I mean, I like Dreidel. I think Dreidel is a very upbeat,
Well, it
spirited
was
song.
it was a very bold change. It was a totally different musical structure that I was fooling with. The record did not turn out the way I heard it. We had a lot of trouble, Ed Freeman and I did, making that record. We did okay with American Pie, but after there was a big fallout, and Ed admitted that he ruined that record, and I don't think he did, but it wasn't what I wanted. But, again, when you're flying without a net, you take chances with music, and if you fall, you fall. That's why people stay, within a certain commercial bandwidth in terms of what they write, so that kind of everything, feels like a Billy Joel song or a James Taylor song or a Rolling Stones song or whatever. But I don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go way over there and do something because I want to,
Mm-hmm.
not because I don't care about the money. I'm doing it because it's what I want to do. I'm an artist.
Yeah.
And occasionally something will happen. But as far as that goes, in terms of people asking me about my song all the time, I realize that they love that song so much, and they get a chance to finally meet me or talk to me, and they're just dying to ask me some questions about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would never be rude enough, to say anything like, well, I have written other songs. I would never
Mm-hmm.
do that to anybody, because I know that they're being very sincere
Mm-hmm.
about what they want to know, and I'm happy to tell them.
Well, no, and Mr. Penn wasn't, ruder either. It's just the idea that, I can only imagine an artist thinking, well, I mean, I'm sure Arthur Miller sometimes said, well, I did write other plays other than Death of a Salesman.
This
I mean,
happens a lot. Listen, Clark Gable was all he ever talked about was Gone with the Wind. And Gable was the king of Hollywood, made one hit movie after another, but that's a very good analogy, because Gone with the Wind, in comparison to his successful star career, is pretty much the same as American Pie is to my successful music career. It's
mm-hmm.
just so much bigger,
Mm-hmm.
that it has to be acknowledged. Because look at the opposite. You talk all the time with Don McLean for an hour, you don't even bring it up. I mean, that's crazy. You
Mm-hmm.
have to bring it up. It's the elephant in the room. And it's one of those things where whenever you see have something like that, um, in my case, uh, well, you can't follow it. You see,
Yeah.
you have to go. That's why Vincent came out and luckily did follow it, in a whole different way, but not going head to head with it because you can't follow it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And when you can't follow something, then people move in for the kill. Well, he can't follow it.
Yeah.
But
Right.
my
Right.
response is, well, number one, you can't write it, and number two, if you had it, you couldn't follow it. I don't think anybody could follow it, and nobody could follow Gone with the Wind either. That nobody has.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I've always appreciated, your willingness to, not only go into different genres of music, but even sample, quite unexpected songs from other sources. Like I remember the first time I heard and I enjoyed on the Amazon. And I thought, oh wow, that's a clever song. And then I realized, this is the pre-Google age, so I had to do a lot of research before I uncovered this. You actually borrowed that from a 1920s, 30s
Yeah,
British
Broadway.
musical that was a turnabout of the Cinderella
It was
legend.
called Mr. Cinders.
Uh-huh.
You know more about it than I do. But I think it was Ivor Novello, maybe, who wrote the lyrics, or one of those guys. And I heard the great Bobby Short sing that song on the piano on an album I had of Mabel Mercer and Bobby Short at Town Hall. I fell in love with it. First of all, I had so much fun trying to remember it. And so I put it on the Don McLean album, and we had to bring a tap dancer in,
Mm-hmm.
an old man in his 70s who knew how to do the soft shoe. And we did that, and we had a lot of fun with that. And I used to sing it all the time in my shows. I should bring it back because it is a fun song and a wonderful
Oh
song.
yes. Oh, yes. Now, talking about breakout songs, uh, and I Love You So. Your version is wonderful, but also it's been covered by so many people. And if I'm not mistaken, it was the last top 40 single Pericomo ever
Yeah, it was
recorded.
it was a million seller and a Grammy nominee. That's one of the many Grammys things that I have done have lost. But but yeah, uh, yeah, "And I Love You So" was the last song Elvis Presley ever put out on records because he did it on an album called Elvis Today,
Mhm.
and then it's the last song on the fourth side of the Elvis in Concert album.
Mhm.
And as a matter of fact, RCA just gave me a triple platinum plaque. It's one of the many gold and platinum plaques that are in this room where I'm sitting that have been awarded to me in the last couple of years because we found the right people to ask for them. But Josh Groban and Drake. I wrote a song with Drake. Used some old music of mine and wrote a song he sold 4 million records with, called "Do It Wrong."
Mm.
Came from the Primetime album. Two songs I wrote called "The Wrong Thing to Do" and "When a Good Thing Goes Bad." And he took most of the lyrics to his song from those two songs.
Oh, yeah. Well, now, and you cut last year when uh, some of your albums were reissued on vinyl. A couple of your country albums uh, were well received, and again, showed that country is a genre you're very fond of.
Well, I loved Marty Robbins. I did a Marty Robbins album of all Marty
Mhm.
Robbins stuff. And I had a couple of chart records with a song called "Going for the Gold," and another one was "Eventually," written by a lady named Terry Sharp, who passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago. Um, yeah, I love Nashville. I make all my records in Nashville because I know all those guys. They're the guys I have on the road. They're the guys that I record with, and I know all of them, and they all know me. And It started in 1978 when I went over to work with Larry Butler, and I had a bunch of hits. I had "Crying," "Since I Don't Have You," "Castles in the Air." Those were all with the Jordanaires, Elvis's group, and had Bob Moore on bass and uh, Pig Robbins on piano, and all the great acoustic players, Jimmy Capps and Ray Edenton, and little old me. So, in the old days, the fun thing about making records was that you walked into a studio with guys who were giants, in the recording business. And and then some of those guys would look at you like, what do you got? What are you going to do today? You know, they don't care. I'm getting paid anyway. They can be, there always be, especially Nashville guys, will always be uh, polite, but they can be like really turned on. But if they're turned off, they'll stay polite and they'll just do it,
Mhm.
and take the check. So we don't make records like that anymore. They make tracks and you put the vocal on somewhere else, and somebody else emails in the guitar part, and somebody else emails in the piano part, and they use drum machines. But if you were in the studio with us when we were making records, and throughout my career, I've always made records in the studio with the guys, jokes will happen, funny things will be said, people will crack you up, and you'll get a whole other level of energy going. It's just very organic and natural and real. Stuff now is very technical. It's very. I have a saying that I like. The trail is poetry, the road is prose, and the highway is mathematics.
Mm.
So, country music now is on the highway. They're not on the road. They're not on the trail.
Mhm.
You know, Uncle Dave Macon, he was on the trail. And but the road was all those other guys. Hank Williams and the rest of it. But now it's just it's business. It's numbers. It's cold. And but I've got one more album that I'm going to come out with. I may make one after that. I don't know. I kind of have to once in a while, sit down and fiddle around with something and come up with a concept.
Well, you've been very generous with your time, and I
Thank you.
appreciate it. One last question now. You're going on the road now to tour. I understand, but you had some touring plans last year, but like
Oh
so
yeah.
many things that were, set asunder because of COVID, these were delayed. But
Yes.
you're going to be with a live audience again. Uh, when you sing, and of course, you inevitably have to sing uh, American Pie. After all these years, do you ever find yourself blanking on the lyrics? I mean,
No.
is there ever a night where you go, if
No,
only
because
for a couple of seconds, and then you
people,
kind of,
no, it makes it sound like that's the only song I sing in the show. I
no,
have to know hundreds and hundreds of
yeah,
songs, and no, I don't have that. I don't have any kind of negative relationship with my music. None.
mm-hmm.
I treat every song the same.
Mm-hmm.
I sing every song uh, with as much sincerity and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
accuracy as I can. It's very easy for artists. I mean, you remember the Elvis Presley the last special they had on him on CBS when he was very heavy and he was very, you saw it. Everybody saw it. And he's singing like just throwing these songs away, like he's barely able to get the words to "Don't Be Cruel" out of his mouth. You know, that's that is that shows you that how troubled this guy was, because he was always a professional. If nothing else, Elvis was always a professional and put on a very good show. Now he just was, he was so sick of these songs, and finally he gave into it and said, you know, teddy bear, remember you, teddy bear, and just didn't care. And the audience still loved it, which
Oh
was the
yes,
thing.
oh yes, oh yes. Yes. Look, I know you got to go, but I'll leave you with this short story. Within the last year of his life, Elvis Presley performed in concert in Jackson, Mississippi. And at the time, I was the arts and entertainment editor for the Clarion Ledger there. And I reviewed the concert. And I more or less said, look, he's still got the voice when he wants to use it, but he really doesn't look like he's in such great shape. I had people calling death threats to my home
Oh,
for writing
I
that.
wish I had fans like that.
I mean,
Boy, I wish I had that.
and I can only imagine what I'd be getting back if they would have had Twitter back in those days. I
Oh,
mean,
yes.
but
Well, the
I
thing about it is everybody gets this treatment now.
oh yeah,
If some little girl does it or a boy does a TikTok people don't like, you thousands of people
um,
will write them and tell them what a slut she is or this or that. They were talking about Alex Baldwin in this latest lawsuit against him. All his followers went after some lady who was I guess, the sister of a fallen Marine, and I don't really know the story, but she was saying, "My God, they just were threatening me and all this stuff." A lot of threats, with
yeah.
the internet.
Well, Don McLean is alive and well
Yes, he
and
is.
still making terrific music. And
Hopefully.
wish you a happy anniversary
Thank you.
uh, for American Pie, and I hope you enjoy many more.
Thank you, and same to you, and enjoy your day. And I'm now going out to a Mexican restaurant, so I'm going to take my earphones off. And thank you very much.
Well, bon appetit, and stay well and be safe.
Bye bye.